Okay, so I received some requests where people asked if I could continue with this series, so here we are. Up to this point, you've only been able to create one basic type of structure, and that's a wall, and there was a second type of that structure, the wall that was like 1/3 or 2/3 height. Now we're going to have an entirely new structure, and it's going to be a roof. So as you can see, there's a new asset here called roof. This was made externally. It was made in Paint 3D, which is a free 3D modeler that comes with Windows 10. And I just want to show you a few things about it. So when you import from Paint 3D, and only if you do Paint 3D, this is probably fine if you're using Blender or something else, it comes with a scale factor of 1, okay? But if we take that and put it into the scene, you don't see it. You see the selector, but it's just too small. So if you're using Paint 3D, make sure you scale up your object. Let's do 100, and now you can see it. Okay, so after you've done that, this isn't quite as, the base really isn't square. The base of it is really rectangular, so we need to make it a little bit more square. Again, you probably won't have to do this in yours. I just want to let you know that once you've imported a model, that you're not stuck with it. You can still make some changes. So in this case, we're going to change its Z scale. I believe I had to change it to like 135, something like that. But again, depending on what you use, you might not have to make any changes. I just want you to know that you can make the changes once you've imported it. So we're going to take that. We're going to put that into our asset area, so it is a prefab. So make sure you distinguish between these. This is the source model. This is the prefab that actually has the transform, any other and any other components, like we're eventually going to add a script to it and that kind of thing. So delete it from the scene because you don't want it to be there. It's yet another structure that you're going to instantiate. So what do we want to do? Well, if we go to our player con script, this is how we instantiate the object. So what we're going to do is we're going to by default, when you click B for build, it instantiates the wall, similar to Fortnite, that whenever you go into build mode, it builds the wall, at least on the console. I think it might work a little bit different on the PC. So the idea is that we want you to then be able to cycle through different pieces. So it starts off as a wall, but you can then cycle through a roof. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're not using the right mouse button, so let's go ahead and use the right mouse button. So we're already using the scroll wheel to cycle through size, because that's how you go from the full-size wall to like a third wall. The right mouse button we'll use to cycle through other objects. So what would that look like? Well, before we do that, we need to create a variable for that new object. So we're in player con script. It's a public transform. It is going to be the roof object. And again, you don't have to do the OBJ. I'm doing that so that way when these show up in the list when I'm typing and it's giving me the various variables and the various ways I can complete the code, I want to make sure that I distinguish between which of the variables are objects. So we go ahead and save that. Click on the main camera because that's what it's attached to. And when we click on the main camera, you can see the new roof object is there. So make sure you grab the prefab, so not the model, but the actual prefab. And now the main camera, for want of a better term, is aware of the roof, and you're going to be able to instantiate the roof. So how do we do that? As we said, we're going to use the right mouse button. So if, sorry, that was completely wrong. If input get mouse button, it's already predefined. and it's mouse button 1. Left is 0, 1 is left is 0, right is 1. Sorry. Nope. And you don't need the semicolon, you need another parenthesis. So it's 2 parentheses because the first one opens it, the second one is for the number, and so both need to close. So for every open, you need a close. There's our brackets. And what we're going to say is it's going to be very similar to this. It's just instead of instantiating the block medium object, we're just going to go ahead and instantiate the roof. So current focus object equals transform instantiate, and we're going to instantiate, as we said, the roof object. And this was what I was talking about, where you get the pop-up window. I know that's an object because that's how I named the variable. Now, here we did current grid. So you've already seen, nice and simple, a single variable that contains 3 vectors. Problem is, because of the center point, that we want this to be above the center point. In other words, we have the collider boxes, and that was at like the center of the grid. Well, the roof is really above the grid. It's really in the grid over it. So we need to tweak the location. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this down into its 3 vectors. So vector 3. So new vector 3, excuse me. Current grid dot x. So we've taken out the x variable, but we're not going to change it. Or should I say the x vector? Sorry, the x vector. Current grid dot y. This is the one that we want to change. Let's add like 0.85 f. It's not perfect, but again, these are meant to be just a launch pad. These are just meant to be a primer. You can tweak the details for yourself. And again, depending on what the size of the object that you're using and where you made it, this is going to be different for you. And then the final vector is z. So current grid dot z, close it, and it's going to use the roof object's rotation. So yes, it looks like a complete disaster at first, but when you read through what you're doing, like I said, the main difference is you've taken this and you've broken it down into its 3 vectors, and you're modifying the middle one. So it looks like a mess, but you can see current grid, current grid, current grid. And obviously you're not using the block object's rotation because you're instantiating the roof, so you'd use the roof object's rotation. So pretty straightforward. Anyways, so we're saying that when you right-click the mouse button, that's what's going to happen. When you right-click the mouse button, that will get instantiated in that position. So we'll save this. So we B for build mode. Now we right-click, and there we go. We have our roof. And we'll just rotate around, so it doesn't quite fit. Looks like it should be a little bit bigger. Might be slightly too high, but that's okay. Again, this is just meant to show you the basics. So if you do, so you don't really want to have this here, though, this wall, okay? Because you've said I want to work with a roof, not a wall. So we want the wall to really be destroyed. So how do we do that? Well, just as when we did the mouse scroll in PlayerCon to instantiate the new lower wall, we're going to mimic this. So when we come to WallCon, see, here's the corresponding mouse scroll. Destroy the object if it doesn't have a place status of set. So we can actually kind of put these two together to really kind of drive home that point. So we copy this. But we don't want this because that's the instantiation of the object. What we want this to destroy it. So again, it's not really any new coding per se. You're just recycling code that you've already used. So you're saying if the right mouse button gets clicked, then destroy any object that doesn't have a status of set. And remember, it gets that status by hitting the space button. Make sure we save it. And now we will run this. So what should happen is we hit B to build. That creates the wall. Then we right-click, and that should make the roof instantiate. So we'll run it. B for build. And there we go. And it destroys the wall. So that's what we wanted. Now, the only problem with this is obviously you shouldn't be able to build a roof without any walls. And we also need to make sure we have the same options available as far as can you make out of wood, stone, metal. So basically it's just rinse and repeat with the functionality that you already saw for the wall object. You apply it to the roof object. You already have a script. Probably could just put the script onto the roof. Have to make a few tweaks based on the object name. But that's about it, I think, for this one. So yeah, that should do it for this one. In the next video, what we'll do is then we'll attach the wall conscript to the roof, and then at that point we'll be able to have the roof cycle through the various materials as well, because right now it goes through stone, goes through metal, wood, and we want the same materials to apply to the roof. Okay, so that should about do it for this one.